everyone. Welcome to your online lecture for this week. We are talking about individuals and groups on social media. This is your Thursday lecture. So we'll start with a warm-up. We'll talk about who is a social media influencer, what is produced, what is monetized in this environment, and this question of who do you work for? If you are an influencer, what are the constraints? What are your responsibilities? We'll end with that. All right. What is culture jamming? And you can pause the video here, double check your notes, make sure that you have a definition for this. I suppose we could have a Dora the Explorer moment when I ask you, what is culture jamming? And wait an awkward length of time and go, very good. But I'll let you pause the video, find the definition. Okay. Hopefully you found the definition. This is from last week. Culture jamming's important because it aims to disrupt or subvert mainstream culture in order to expose cultural norms that we often don't think about, and in many ways to critique those norms. And sometimes it's shared widely, sometimes it's not, right? It can be both from countercultural or subcultural groups, but they're pointing out or critiquing something about mainstream culture. All right. So on that note, I'm going to structure the lecture today around 3 questions to understand this influencer economy. So first is, what do we mean by a social media influencer? Who is an influencer? We'll talk about how both the readings today suggest we should think of this as an assemblage or a collection of actors who work together to sustain this phenomenon rather than as like random individuals. So consequently, if social media influence is tied to a newer economic thinking, we need to consider what exactly is produced, marketed, sold, and or monetized by influencers. And what are the constraints on online influence? Who do you work for as an influencer? And this leads to then some really interesting ethical questions, questions about responsibility. Do you work for yourself? Are you working for your audience or your fan base? The products and brands that you endorse? Where do your loyalties lie as an influencer? What exactly are you responsible for? And to whom? But to get to this question, we have to first start by looking at influencers. So when you look at this image, this is an interesting question this day and age, but I want to know, do you recognize these people? Who are they? Some of them you might recognize, right? Like you've got King Bach over in the center. You got Tyler Oakley off to the right side, Brittany Ferlin, Joey Graceffa, and Cam and Nash, right? This is an illustration by Alex Williamson. And while you may not know these influencers, these are some of the bigger early YouTube stars. Perhaps not as big now on the whole. Tyler Oakley very much went and has been doing more streams off YouTube, doing other content. I believe he's been doing some Twitch content. So maybe not the same as like Smosh and Mythical, who are still around on the platform. But these were really big influencers at that time. So we get into this question. Why are they important? Why do we know influencers? How do we know influencers? Well, we're going to go ahead and look at one of these people, the early influencer Tyler Oakley. And he originally rose to online celebrity status through his YouTube channel. And so we're going to watch this. This might end up being cut out of the video that goes on YouTube for copyright reasons, but hopefully Tyler's not monitoring this too much anymore. And as you watch this video, it's very short, I want you to look at what's going on here. What's the role of the camera? What's the communicative style happening here? What kind of influencer is Tyler Oakley? And perhaps, if you can, connect this back to how we talked about YouTube and the affordances of the platform, and think about this through the lens of the rise of YouTube celebrities. All right, let's give this a watch.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Tyler. I'm here at Venice Beach on location with this delicious taco. Can you see? Come here, come closer. Can you see the label? Do you see what kind of taco that is? I'm getting an exclusive first bite. So this is my first bite of a Cool Ranch Frito taco. My heart is actually pumping. I'm really nervous. Oh, this is fancy as shit. Okay, so this was the original. Shit everywhere. This is the new one. Come closer. So, I'm like actually shaking. I'm nervous. Oh my gosh, and you can feel the dust. I just need you to know. It's here. This is happening. Am I doing this? Like this? Ready? Fuck. That's good. Wait, the best part, come here. Can you see that? It's like, yeah, that's a Cool Ranch. That's the best. Oops, shit. Okay, well, I'm gonna enjoy this. I'll see you later.
Okay, what do you notice in that video? Think about it for a moment. And I know some of the things based off of what you've noticed in other videos I've given you from early YouTube it is a short video. It's what, a minute and 7 seconds in length. Those were more typical videos. This is maybe a little shorter from his other content, but this is very like slice of life vlog kind of style. And a lot of Tyler Oakley's videos were very much him talking to the camera in an everyday vernacular kind of voice, treating the camera and therefore the audience as a friend, right? We can also notice that the production quality isn't here. Again, we've got wind affecting audio. When we get closer, the white balance goes crazy. He starts glowing. He becomes so white. So those skills weren't quite there. What attracted people to Tyler Oakley and to a lot of the OG YouTube influencers was a cult of personality, right? And these parasocial relationships. You feel like they can be your friend. So while that's an excellent representation of YouTube influencer culture in 2013, I also want to provide a more current influencer example so that we're not just talking about like past people. And even though this video is itself 2 years old, I like the trend, and Call Me Chris is one of the biggest TikTok influencers who's then also gone cross-platform. So, you know, no shade to Tyler Oakley, but perhaps if you haven't heard of Oakley before, you have heard of Call Me Chris and her multitude of characters. So we'll go ahead and watch this short, which is TikTok short, rather than a YouTube video. And I want you to consider those same questions that you did while you were watching Oakley. What's going on here? What is the role of the camera? What's the communicative style? And how do you see this as similar and different from Oakley's video? What has changed over time and with our different platforms? All right, let's go ahead and give this a watch.
How to dress to attract a man, a tutorial. Rule number 1, make sure your hair is always long and lustrous and never put up. Rule number 2, make sure to show a little skin, especially those stems, ladies. Rule number 3, footwear should be dainty and delicate. Rule number 4, show off that waist at all times. Rule number 5, always have a pleasant expression on your face. I promise you will attract a man.
Okay, so this is a TikTok style video.
How to dress to attract a man, a tutorial.
It is less than 30 seconds in length. It's 27 seconds. So that may not be the same as we see with traditional YouTube videos now, but there's also a lot of other differences here. So think about this for a second. See those differences. Think about how Chris puts forth her content, her relationship to the camera and to the audience. Well, one major thing you've probably noticed is the production quality is way different, right? We have cuts happening. This is happening in an indoor space where she can control the lighting. Framing is a bit better. It's on a static position, so the camera, maybe it's on a stack of books, maybe it's actually put in a stand correctly. I don't know, no judgment, whatever works, but the camera is stationary, and so you have a very stationary, clear, balanced effect happening there. And there's no audio from that space. That's an indoor space, so the audio might have been better. Maybe it's echoey. I don't know what the walls are like in her house. But it's a voiceover. And this is pulling from TikTok culture because it's a viral voiceover, right? So it's an audio clip that went viral on the platform, and she's participating in the meme for this. But we see a big difference. While Oakley addresses the camera directly, and Chris is making eye contact with the camera. In both ways, the camera is a substitute for the audience. But while Oakley speaks to the camera in this everyday, using swears, but as just kind of part of the voice, not as real curses, you get this, like, I'm having a conversation with a buddy kind of feel from it. And while you can still develop this parasocial relationship with Call Me Chris, she's not speaking to the audience as a friend. The audience is the audience through the camera, but she's participating in something that feels way more performative. That's not to say that both weren't performative, but hers feels more produced, more focused on the performance, while Oakley's intentionally felt like slice of life, everyday conversation. So when we talk about digital or social media influencers, we often make some associations, typically talking about someone who uses social media to accrue social capital through increasing the number of followers, friends, social connections, in order to then access certain financial opportunities by virtue of having a large audience or network of users that pay attention to their social media presence. And there are differing quantitative ideas of when one qualifies as an influencer, from 5K to increasingly 10K followers or even 100K followers. Your access to financial gain, participation in the influencer economy, often depends on curating a tight and vast network. We tend to think of individuals who work as influencers as our friends, right? We follow them because we like them, their content, their personality, We follow them because it feels like they're giving something to us. And finally, this is important. There are some ways that we want to distinguish between celebrities who become influencers versus this idea of everyday folks rising to influencer status by using the affordances of network technologies. Although I'll talk more about the differences and similarities in a minute. So Cotter characterizes digital influencers as a type of micro celebrity. So we need to understand this difference between celebrities and micro celebrities. Because the defining characteristics of social media influencers are often laid out in contrast to celebrities. But both curate a massive online following through their social media presence. So the first big difference is the source of fame. For influencers, their source of fame is fame garnered through online work versus having pre-existing fame and joining a platform. And the second big difference is entrepreneurship. So we can think of this in terms of production and content creation in particular. Good content produces engagement, and engagement produces more engagement. The idea here is that for social media influencers, their labor is focused on the production of media that people want to watch. We could also think of entrepreneurship in terms of individual success stories, right? These stories of self-production and self-improvement. You'll see a lot of social media influencers talk about how they worked very hard to become social media influencers, about all the different roles that they took on and how that led to success and often self-improvement along with that. The third characteristic of micro-celebrities is authenticity. Micro-celebrities emphasize this everyday real vernacularity. Whether that is from treating the camera as your friend or creating content in a way that feels humorous and connected to the audience. Not just that we find it funny, but we feel like we're part of it. So micro celebrities promote this accessibility to the identity, this self-improvement that is accessible to all versus the inaccessible, fantasized celebrity culture. This out of touch, the inaccessible to regular people. We see celebrities as very different from us. We see micro celebrities as successful us. And they do this thing as part of this authenticity of self-branding. This idea that if you are just yourself and you make content that you love, the audience will come. This unfortunately isn't true. You need to think through if you have an audience for the thing and how you make it accessible to that audience. But that's the mentality, right? It's a very like pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you can do it too. Everyone can be a social media influencer if they just try. And finally, perhaps the most important is this loyalty and connection with their audiences. And we have to think, are there some ethical connotations here? with micro celebrities, there is a need to be accessible to fans. We see more influencers going to conventions and whether that's YouTubes or TikToks or whatever, to meet fans, to converse with them. We see that more than we see with traditional celebrities, unless they're in like fandom spheres, and then you've got like the Supernatural and all of that jazz who are doing the convention circuit. But in general, there's way more expectation for micro celebrities to be seen and to interact with their fans, to be loyal to their fans, and to have their fans be loyal to them. They depend on that connection more than most celebrities, for sure. And combining authenticity and entrepreneurship, these everyday influencers, these real people, use their massive social capital, their connections, friends, followers, etc., to find ways towards capital or financial gain. In the era of brand cultures, being real and authentic has become this kind of animating force, and it's a strategic advantage point to differentiate themselves from traditional celebrities, dismantle hierarchical relationships, to cultivate intimacy and effective relationships, to create this sense of proximity, and to use their fame, in other words, to keep and grow the attention they are getting. But entrepreneurship and authenticity provide everyday digital influencers two things that distinguish them and give them strategic advantage. It gives them credibility, right? Through being relatable, being seen as everyday. And therefore, we see them as trustworthy. But, perhaps paradoxically, they are also aspirational. They depict lifestyles that you could have. They do things and use products that you could access. They're within reach. They're a goal that we can see. Whereas with some celebrities, it feels too far away, right? Like crazy conversations around whether a purse made out of ice costs millions of dollars. This idea about a certain celebrity posting and saying, should we take my jet or yours? That doesn't feel attainable. But a influencer saying, I love using this product, it gives me this thing that people like about me, that feels reachable, right? And they have this individual gumption that they really emphasize. In other words, the narrative of the influencer promotes a story of success through individual hard work, such that anyone with talent and a drive to cultivate their individual unique brand can be successful too. Now, this is the persona that they put forth. I do want to take a note to work back on this trustworthiness. There was a moment in history where terms changed and videos that were paid promotion had to be labeled with #ad. And suddenly, a lot of influencers were upset about that because it made transparent the things that they were pushing based off of them being paid to do so, not based off of their own use of things. And that's completely fair, right? Brand deals are fair to do. But they were using their trustworthiness to hide the marketing, if that makes sense. To convince you to buy a product without realizing they had been paid to convince you to buy that product. So just like we have to question our internal bias towards technology and AI and any of these tools, assuming that they're good from the get-go, we should also be questioning the influencers, especially the ones that we feel could be our friends. And our readings today try to read through some of these myths of the influencer and consider how the individual influencer is really part of a larger economic phenomenon. They attempt to debunk the myth of the individual success story. So I want to break down Cotter's point here. In an influencer economy, there are many more people than just the influencers. There are talent agencies, there's brokers. There are standard rates at which they're paid. And some influencers may not know those rates and end up getting paid way less than they're actually worth. So there's these talent agencies, the agents, the intermediaries, the talent brokers. There's these assemblage of actors. We have the users, the algorithms, and the platform owners all working together towards this relationship that creates this influencer. And importantly, the problem of gatekeeping persists. So we talk about like Nepo babies in celebrities in Hollywood, but who has access, what kind of access to become an influencer is not everyone. Influencers often have to mold a certain digital persona, and they have to target a kind of audience that is sellable. And perhaps what can help make this easiest to understand is Twitch live streamers who are successful have talked about when they got started, they had to be streaming typically 7 days a week, at least 12 hours a day to build their audience. If you have to work to live, if you don't have savings for whatever reason, that is not feasible. You can't get on the ground floor of what you need to do to even think about being successful. So who can be an influencer, unfortunately, is still very much determined by haves versus have-nots. Who has access and what kind. And in addition, again, not every topic has an audience wide enough for you to make money off of talking about it. Not every person, not every persona makes a good influencer. So what kinds of personae are legible have to conform to industry standards. And so people who want to be influencers unfortunately can't just be themselves most of the time. They have to unpack the ways that these often black box standards affect their content. There are metrics related to personality type. And there's this myth of uniqueness, of self-branding as an individual pursuit. But unfortunately, as much as I hate boxes, if you want to be a social media influencer, you are expected to fit into certain boxes. And there are criteria for evaluating your connection and your success. But influencers are navigating a partially unknown rule book. Is it a reward style network? How clear is it? It's not a very clear industry, unfortunately. For how much social media influencers are seen as needing to be their real selves and open and clear and transparent with their audiences, which is actually not true, right? That's the persona. The industry itself is anything but transparent. And that means that labor in an influencer economy is much more complicated. So, influencer labor is not just about good content production, but about strategically playing the visibility game. It emphasizes this interplay between actors that acknowledge each actor's individual role. So, for instance, talking about Twitch streamers, there have been people that I know who are trying to make it big as a Twitch streamer who look at the demographics of Twitch and they look at the fact that most Twitch streamers are US based, successful ones at least, which is not to say that that country's better. It is to say that a lot of the audience is US. But that means a lot of that audience is already taken up because the market for US streamers is pretty saturated. So what they've taken to do is stream at odd hours for a US market to try and get an audience from other countries who are in other time zones. That's a strategy that they play that is not about the content that they produce, but increasing their visibility to people who may join their audience. Influencers also have to interpret platform logics and black boxed rules. And there's a couple ways that they approach how they interpret the algorithms, the community norms, and the visibility logics of a platform. And that creates these internal categories of influencers. The first is relational influence. So, from your reading, this entails broad yet intimate social relationships and expertise. Relational methods focus on personally engaging with followers and potential followers. So, relational influencers are folks who believe that success comes from honing genuine connection, of being authentic, in quotes, and vulnerable in front of their following. So they will often talk about their fans as their friends. And they will be able to recognize certain usernames from chat or from the YouTube comments. This does tend to build more parasocial relationships, which is great in terms of the connections and your fans feeling like your friend and having loyalty to you, but can lead to some unsafe situations where fans and followers overstep that connection. The second type of influencer is the simulation influencer. These influencers prioritize metrics over intimacy. So we can think of relational influence as the qualitative person and simulation influence as the quantitative person. They treat engagement as social currency. They believe that visibility can be achieved beyond or without efforts to build authentic relationships. So these are the people who approach the visibility game as something to be won by simulating social capital and circumventing logics of authenticity. So these are the people who will use automation services like bots. They'll do strategic follow, unfollow moments, right? They'll do a follow for a follow and then they'll unfollow a bunch of people so their ratio looks a lot better. You'll get things like Instagram pods as part of this as well. So a lot of different ways that people do this, but the point is the numbers, not the connection. And these differences between simulation influence and relational influence suggest that there are hierarchies of authenticity and authentic connectivity. In some, influence is negotiated by multiple actors. It's an assemblage of goals and different structures, some visible, some very not, trying to figure out how to reach success in this world leads to two very different approaches. One of them I tend to fall more in line with. As you know from this class, I tend to favor not having a quantitative only, a numbers only approach. But Kotter ultimately here is emphasizing how this occurs in an interplay between platform owners, users, algorithms, agents, this assemblage, right? We think of social media influencers as individuals who succeeded. More often than not, it's not just them. There's a lot of people, programs, platforms, personalities at play. So that leads to your discussion for this week. This will count as your lecture activity for this Thursday. In the Discord chat, which is the individuals and groups chat, I want you to first say, what do we mean by social media influencer? Who is an influencer? Define it in your own words. Then I want you to answer, if social media influence is tied to a newer economic thinking, what exactly is being produced, marketed, sold, and monetized by influencers? And 3, what are the constraints on online influences or influence? Who do you think influencers work for? What are their responsibilities as influencers? Are there ethical concerns? Think about hashtag ad when you're thinking this through. Those are the same questions that we brought up at the start. So hopefully at this point in the lecture, you're able to answer these. You may want to pause the video, go ahead, put this into the Discord. I do expect it in there by the end of our regular class time. So pause the video, put that in, make sure that you've got a post in there by 12:50 this Thursday. Okay, that should have been enough time with the pause. So, key takeaways from today. Consider influencers as an assemblage or a collection of actors who work together to sustain the phenomenon of social media influencer, not as individuals. Understand Kotter's definition of influencers as micro-celebrities and how micro-celebrities differ from traditional celebrities. There's 4 key differences. Understand that influencers are part of a larger economic phenomenon, and that this ultimately complicates our understandings of labor. All right, so we're looking ahead a couple weeks here, so bear with me. This next Tuesday is Influencer Burnout. We are continuing from our lecture today talking about social media influencers to think about, well, if you are on Twitch 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, you are going to burn out. If you are constantly making content and producing content and putting it out in the world, you are going to burn out. So, what do influencers do when they burn out? They take a break, they go offline, they recalibrate, reassess, and they don't come to class. So, Tuesday, practice what influencers do when they burn out. We will not have class that day. There is also no lab next week because Thursday is Thanksgiving. So, obviously, no lecture that day either. Do work on your rough drafts of video 2.0 because they are due before your lab after Thanksgiving, directly the week after. We're getting into the very end of the semester. There's not a lot of time left. So make sure that you're working on those rough cuts so you have them ready to go for your peer reviews the week after the holiday. The week after Thanksgiving, on Tuesday, we will be back in person. We'll talk about digital inequities. Then we'll talk about trolling on Thursday. You have 1 reading for Tuesday, 2 for Thursday. Some interesting topics coming in here. But yeah, remember for lab this week, if you haven't done it already, there is an online discussion that you need to do. Same thing as we did for surveillance week. So get that done. It is due by this Sunday. Otherwise, keep working on video 2.0. If you have questions, you can email me or email Sarah. We're happy to answer. And I will see you all in, as of Thursday, a week and a half. All right. Bye, all. Have a good day.